I never thought I'd be told to pack my things in the house I helped build, but there I was, standing barefoot on the marble foyer of my own Palm Beach home, staring at my daughter-in-law, Melissa, and some smug man in a cheap suit holding a briefcase. Her arms were crossed, her mouth twisted into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "We've already signed the deal." "Pack your things, Mom," Melissa said with this syrupy, nauseating sweetness. Then she waved a thick folder in my face like she was swatting a fly. "New ownership. You're trespassing." My back straightened. "Excuse me?" The man beside her said nothing, just opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "The house now belongs to Mr. and Mrs. David and Melissa Langston. Per the agreement, you're required to vacate within 72 hours. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just stared at that name, David Langston, printed on that fraudulent cover sheet. My son, my only child. I remember thinking, this is how it happens. Not with a blowout, not with yelling, but with a damn briefcase and a forged signature. Melissa's smile widened, like she was enjoying a private joke. "You really should have let me handle the bills earlier, Karen. This wouldn't have been necessary if you just let us help. You're not exactly in a state to manage a property like this." She gestured at my bathrobe, as if I was some doddering fool who had wandered out in confusion. I had just stepped out of my morning meditation. It was 7:45 a.m. I hadn't even had my tea yet. "You're insane if you think I signed anything like this," I said, calmly. Too calmly, even for myself. "Oh, but you did," she said with mock concern. "Months ago. Don't you remember?" I looked her straight in the eyes, and that's when I knew this was planned. Not spur of the moment, not a misunderstanding. They'd been circling like vultures for months, waiting for the right time to tear the meat off the bones. David wasn't even here. Of course he wasn't. He sent her, always sends her. He doesn't have the spine to face me. I raised him better than that, or at least I thought I did. I walked past them both, right up to the papers, and picked up the top sheet. One glance. The signature at the bottom was a shaky, malformed version of mine, but it wasn't mine. It looked traced. "You've made a mistake," I said, handing it back to the man. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Melissa's expression changed. Not fear, not regret, just a flicker of annoyance, like she was being mildly inconvenienced by a stubborn houseplant. "Oh, Karen," she said softly, "you're not as sharp as you think you are. Just take your little yoga mat and leave with some grace." I didn't answer. I didn't scream or cry. I just turned, walked back upstairs, and closed the door to my bedroom. And in that silence, I let it sink in. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd go quietly. They were wrong. So very, very wrong. By the time I came downstairs, they were gone. The front door stood slightly ajar, the scent of Melissa's perfume still lingering like an unwanted stain in the hallway. I closed it gently, then turned the deadbolt with a deliberate click. She wouldn't get through that door again without a court order. The house was quiet again, eerily so. I walked into the sunroom and opened the windows, letting in the ocean breeze. I needed air. Clarity. Not that I was surprised, not really. Disappointed? Yes. Betrayed? Without a doubt. But surprised? Not in the slightest. You see, I've lived in this estate for 34 years. My late husband, John, and I bought the land back when Palm Beach was still humble. He laid out the foundation with his own hands, before cancer took those same hands from me just after his 59th birthday. Since then, I've lived alone. And I liked it that way. Peaceful. Predictable. David started pulling away the moment Melissa showed up. She was polished, ambitious, always 2 inches too close to my jewelry box, but never quite touching. I kept my distance. I thought if I stayed polite, respected their space, they'd do the same. I was wrong. They rarely visited. Holidays, mostly. And even then, always in a rush, always with a reason to leave before dessert. I never pressed, never made them feel guilty. I thought giving them space was a form of love. But space, I've learned, is only love when it's chosen by both sides. When it's one-sided, it's abandonment. And when it's exploited, like now, it's a trap. I sat at the breakfast nook, the sun casting long strips of light across the tile floor. My tea had gone cold upstairs, so I made a fresh cup. Jasmine green. Steadying. I sat in silence, letting the cup warm my palms. Melissa's voice echoed in my head. You're not exactly in a state to manage a property like this. It wasn't just a lie. It was a rehearsed narrative. They were building a case, one where I was too old, too confused, too vulnerable to know what was happening. It explained her sudden kindness lately, the surprise flower deliveries, the repeated offers to take over my mail, the home assistant she insisted I install. She called it a gift. I called it a microphone. I'd played along, let her think she was smarter than me. Because that's what happens when you grow old quietly. People confuse stillness for weakness, but they forgot who raised David, who taught him how to balance a checkbook, how to write a resume, how to survive when John died and we had nothing but dust in the savings account and hope in the pantry. They forgot that I built this house twice, once with my husband's hands and once with my own broken heart. And I wasn't about to let a silk-tongued manipulator and her paper-pushing sidekick walk in and take it from me. I finished my tea and pulled out my old black notebook, the one I kept behind the kitchen spice rack. Notes, names, observations. If they wanted to play games, they picked the wrong woman to play with. It started with the electric bill. Melissa had offered to set up auto pay, just to simplify things. I remember the moment clearly. We were sitting in the garden, me pruning roses, her sipping from a tumbler. She never refilled herself. You shouldn't have to worry about things like this anymore, Karen, she had said, slipping the bill off the table like it was a burden too heavy for me. You've done enough. Let us carry some of the weight now. She made it sound sweet, like a daughter's care. I didn't argue, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to watch her closely. People show their intentions not in what they offer, but in what they expect after. Then came the second move. A sleek, white box she dropped off without warning. It's a smart assistant, she smiled, as if that word held comfort. I set it up already. Now you can just say what you need and it'll remind you. Appointments, shopping lists, medications. David says it'll help you stay on top of things. I didn't ask for it. I didn't plug it in. Instead, I turned it over and found the microphone already active, linked to an account with David's email. They weren't even subtle. They wanted to paint a picture, a frail widow slipping into senility, harmless at first, then dangerous, until finally, unfit. Then they'd be the saviors, guardians, owners. I let them think I was going along with it. They started visiting more often after that. Melissa would show up on Saturdays, offering to organize my mail. David would stop by during the week, offering to help with minor repairs, but never actually doing anything. One Sunday, she brought over a stack of envelopes and casually slipped in a bank authorization form halfway through. I pretended to miss it. She even had a pen ready. I just smiled, handed it back to her, and said I'd look through everything after my bath. She took the pen back with a flick of annoyance she tried to mask as concern. They were testing the waters, seeing how close they could get without being slapped back, like snakes warming themselves before they strike. But I was watching. Every moment, every misstep. I wasn't naive. I was waiting for the moment they stopped pretending. And that moment came this morning, with that smug man and his little folder of lies. They thought I was too old to fight, too polite to say no, too isolated to resist. But what they failed to grasp is this: solitude sharpens a woman like me. Every quiet day, every insult I chose not to answer, every boundary I held despite their smiling manipulations, it built something solid in me. They thought I was letting them win. No, I was giving them rope. And now, they're starting to tighten the noose themselves. The printer beeped at 2:17 a.m. That's what did it. Not a grand discovery, not a confrontation. Just a tired old machine in the hallway that had been untouched for days, suddenly churning to life like it had something urgent to say. I hadn't touched it, hadn't printed a thing since last week's grocery list. I got out of bed in the dark, still in my cotton robe, slippers silent against the hardwood floor. The tray had caught a single sheet, half spilled, face down. I slid it out, turned it over, and read the title, Preliminary Sale Agreement, Langston Estate, Palm Beach. It was my address, my estate. My name on the top line. Their names, David Langston and Melissa Langston, on the buyer's line. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I went back to the kitchen, turned on the light, and laid the page down like it was evidence in a trial. Because it was. The signature was mine, but it wasn't. I recognized the handwriting, or rather, the attempt at it. Someone had copied it, clumsily. It was just convincing enough to fool someone who didn't know me. But not me. There was no power of attorney listed, no notary seal. Just this half-baked, fraudulent mess they assumed no one would ever challenge. Because they didn't think I'd ever see it. They must have sent it remotely, probably through that stupid home assistant Melissa gifted me. I never hooked it up, but the app was still installed on her phone. She must have tried to sync something and forgot I still owned the Wi-Fi network. I picked up the paper. My hand didn't shake. They'd already drawn up the contract. Meaning they'd been talking to a realtor. Meaning someone else had likely already seen this. Which meant the clock was ticking. I opened my laptop and typed in the firm's name printed at the bottom, L. Sanford Realty, LLC. There it was. A bland but upscale site, photos of palm-lined properties and million-dollar mansions. I clicked through until I saw it. Coming soon, legacy property in historic Palm Beach. No photos, just a placeholder listing and a serious inquiries-only banner, but it was enough. They hadn't just dreamed about stealing the house. They'd already set the plan in motion, and still part of me searched for a loophole. For a reason. Maybe Melissa misunderstood. Maybe David didn't know. But then I saw the agent's contact. I recognized that name. John Mercer. David's college roommate. The one who crashed on our guest couch the summer after graduation. The one I fed for 3 weeks while he figured things out. So, no, David knew. David was leading it. My son didn't just betray me. He orchestrated the entire theft, start to finish. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it under the spice rack, next to the black notebook. Let them keep printing their lies. I was done collecting clues. It was time to gather firewood. The bridge club met every Thursday. To most, it was just a circle of retirees, shuffling cards and arguing over tricks. But to me, it had become my quiet fortress. Safe faces, predictable laughs, and, more importantly, sharp minds with long memories. That morning, I wore my powder blue cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons and deep pockets. Not for warmth, for concealment. I tucked the fake sale agreement neatly inside, sandwiched between my notepad and breath mints. "Karen!" Lucy waved as I entered. She always sat east, never changed her seat. "You bring that lemon tea again?" "Of course," I smiled. "Some things you can still count on. They didn't ask what was wrong. They didn't need to. It was in my face. The kind of smile you wear to a funeral you can't admit is your own." I waited until after the first game. Waited until the clinking of teacups and the rustle of cookie wrappers masked the drop of my voice. "Frank," I said, looking at Lucy's husband seated across from me. "You used to practice estate law, didn't you?" He looked up slowly. Frank hadn't touched a court file in 5 years, but he still read the paper with a pen in hand, correcting legal language like muscle memory. "I did. Why?" "I found something," I said, slipping the paper across the table like it was nothing more than a recipe. "Tell me if it means what I think it means." He read it in silence. Then again. Then exhaled slowly through his nose. "Did you sign this?" he asked without looking up. "No." He turned to the last page, his brow folding like linen. "No notary seal. No witnesses. And this signature," he tapped it once. "It's a photocopy, probably traced. You said you didn't sign it? I didn't even know it existed until it showed up in my printer at 2 in the morning. Frank's lips thinned. "Then this isn't a contract, it's a felony." Lucy stopped mid-sip. "Frank, it's forgery, Luce," he said firmly. And if they've already shown this to a realtor or submitted it as part of a sale process, they have, I said, and told them everything. The assistant device, the fake concern, the sudden access to bills, the sneaky forms, the listing on Sanford Realty. Even David's old roommate. By the time I finished, no one was eating cookies anymore. Frank nodded. You're still the legal owner, Karen. They've got nothing. But you can't wait around now. You need to get ahead of this. Fast. I pulled the agreement back into my pocket. Can you help? I don't practice anymore, but I know someone who does. Friend of mine. Smart. Quiet. Doesn't flinch when people lie. Then I'd like to meet them, I said. For the first time in days, I felt something steady in my chest. Not peace, exactly. Not yet. But resolve. Something hard and heavy that anchored me to the ground. They wanted me gone. Stripped, silenced, swept away like dust. But dust settles. I don't. The first time Melissa brought me flowers, I was suspicious. It was 6 months ago. A Tuesday. Pale hydrangeas, blue and white, crinkled at the edges like they'd been manhandled in the car ride over. She held them out like a peace offering. I just wanted to check in, she said, all honey and dimples. See how you're feeling. David was so worried about you after your last scan. The last scan. That's what this was about. 3 weeks earlier, my oncologist had called with the results. Remission. A word so heavy it landed on my kitchen table like a bomb. I'd told no one, not even David. I wanted a moment to breathe before they turned it into news. But someone had told them. Probably the nurse practitioner I once listed as emergency contact back when the chemo made it hard to drive. And Melissa? She made it her personal mission to help from that moment on. Not when I was sick. When I got better. That was the difference. That was the problem. You'd think remission would mean relief, celebration, maybe even closeness. But what I got was a woman with a new brand of urgency in her step, asking to review my will, offering to digitize my estate records, suggesting simpler living arrangements. She was expecting me to die, counting on it even. That's when she started planting herself inside my routines, offering to pay bills, asking about emergency access to my accounts, pretending she was worried about my future when really, she was shocked I still had one. I saw it clear as day. They were planning for an inheritance, not a recovery. And now, with the house still mine and my health no longer terminal, I was an inconvenience again. They didn't want to care for me. They wanted to collect on me. So, I decided I'd give them just enough rope. I played the game, let Melissa sort the mail, hover during doctor visits, talk about what's next, with that glossy smile that barely hid her frustration. I even nodded along when she started calling my East Wing, a lot to maintain for someone your age. Then, one day last month, she looked at the big dining room and said, half joking, half mocking, "You should really consider selling, Karen. Something simpler. Maybe a condo by the marina?" I just smiled and said, "That's an idea." She thought I was softening. She mistook manners for surrender. That's always been her fatal flaw. Confusing silence with submission. But what she didn't know was that every visit, every suggestion, every conversation was being cataloged. Written down, cross-referenced. I even started recording our dinners, just in case. All legal, all in my own home. Because if they were going to make me the victim in their story, they'd better be ready for the plot twist. They wanted a helpless old woman, one they could pity and push aside. What they got instead was a survivor with a file of her own. So I made a decision that evening, sipping herbal tea by the bay windows. I wouldn't just defend my house. I'd make it my battlefield. I invited them to dinner. Melissa accepted instantly, of course, too eagerly. She suggested steak. David offered to bring wine. I told them not to bother. I've got a few things I'd like to say, I added with a smile. It's time we discussed next steps. That phrase, next steps, was like catnip to her. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Absolutely, Karen, she said. It's important we all feel secure. Secure. What she meant was, you finally giving up the deed. I set the table as I always did. Linen napkins, heavy silverware, the china with the navy rim John and I bought our first year in Palm Beach. They arrived 10 minutes late. Melissa in a pale green wrap dress that clung too tightly. David in a shirt he used to wear to court when he still believed in having a career instead of riding on mine. I greeted them with warmth, the kind that hides a hammer behind the back. Dinner was salmon and asparagus. Light, civilized. I poured their wine, declined any myself, and waited for them to start digging. Melissa was the first to bite. "So, when you mentioned next steps," I tilted my head as if in thought. "Yes, I've been thinking about legacy a lot lately, and what it means to transition gracefully." David shifted in his seat. I could practically see the fantasy scrolling behind his eyes. A beachfront condo, new title paperwork, maybe a splashy press release in some real estate magazine. "Generous mother-in-law hands over beloved estate. I know how much this house means to you both," I continued, laying my fork down gently. "I've been reflecting on my options." Melissa leaned in, eyes glittering with hunger she mistook for charm. "And? I'm not quite ready to hand over full control," I said slowly, watching her smile falter. "But I'd like to explore a managed transition, something mutually beneficial." David looked confused. Melissa recovered quickly. "Of course. That's very fair of you. What kind of arrangement are you thinking?" I took a breath and let the moment stretch. "Well," I said, "I'd like to retain residence rights naturally, and oversight of any financial activities tied to the property." Melissa's lips tightened just enough to betray her. "Naturally. I'd also like to keep all home-related accounts in my name. Bills, maintenance, insurance. That's understandable," David offered, clearly unsure where the trap was. Melissa, though, she couldn't help herself. "Karen," she said, voice dipping into that soft, condescending register she thought sounded persuasive. "You've always been very independent, but managing a property this size? It's not getting easier. We just want to help." I smiled and lifted my phone from under the placemat. Tapped it. The red circle blinked. Recording. "Oh, I appreciate that," I said. "I know how deeply invested you are in my well-being." Melissa went pale. "You've been so helpful lately," I added, my voice steady. "In fact, I was just thinking maybe we could go over everything you've done so far, for my records." She didn't answer. David looked at her, then back at me, suddenly catching on. The rest of dinner was quiet, but everything I needed, I already had on tape. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Too quiet for a home that usually creaked with memory. No Bach from the stereo, no gurgling coffee pot, just the thud-thud of cardboard hitting hardwood. I walked in through the garage door and stopped dead in the hallway. Men in matching navy polos were in my living room, stacking boxes, rolling up rugs. A flat screen leaned awkwardly against the wall near the dining room table. My portrait, John's and mine, was gone from above the mantel. "Excuse me?" I said sharply, though my voice stayed even. "What is going on here?" Melissa turned from the kitchen, clipboard in hand like she was running inventory at a warehouse. Her eyes widened, mock surprise, not guilt. "Oh, Karen, I didn't expect you back so soon. I was gone less than an hour. Pharmacy run, vitamin D and low-sodium crackers." I held the paper bag tight in my hand, tighter than I realized. "Want to tell me why strangers are packing up my house?" She took a slow breath, adopting that voice, the one reserved for elderly neighbors and tantruming toddlers. "Karen, this is what we talked about. Remember?" "I remember dinner." "And manipulation. What I don't remember is authorizing a move." She approached like I was some wounded animal that needed calming. "You've been forgetting things lately. The papers, the bank stuff. It's okay. It happens. We've talked to a professional who can help." I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just cold. "So your plan was to gaslight me, steal the house, and call it caregiving?" "Karen," she said softly, "we only want what's best for you. David and we're worried. You've been under a lot of stress." I turned slowly. One of the movers, just a kid, barely 20, froze mid-step with a lamp in his hand. "Put it down," I said quietly. He obeyed instantly. Melissa tried to smile again. I know it's overwhelming, but we've made arrangements. There's a lovely residential care community in Delray. Ocean views, daily yoga. They'll even handle your medications. And who exactly authorized this? I asked. You? She held up a sheet of paper like it was sacred text. You did. Last month. You signed this during your follow-up with Dr. Berger. It grants me temporary authority. I never saw that form. You did. You just probably don't remember. There it was. The final nail. She wasn't just trying to take the house. She was rewriting the story of my mind, painting me as incapable. I stepped forward, close enough to smell her perfume. Let me be clear. I am of sound mind. I have legal proof of ownership. I have witnesses. I have audio. And if you or your hired hands move another thing in this house, I will call the police and press trespassing charges. She blinked. Once, then smiled again. But this time, it wavered. You're making this harder than it has to be. And you, I said calmly, have made the mistake of underestimating me. She hesitated, then turned and whispered something to the movers. They began retreating. For now, but I knew they'd be back. And next time? So would my lawyer. I made the call calmly. No panic, no yelling, just a measured voice. This is Karen Langston. I'd like to report unauthorized persons inside my home. Dispatch took my address, said they'd send a unit. By the time the cruiser pulled into the driveway, Melissa was back in the foyer, arms crossed, lips curled in her signature, "You're overreacting," smirk. The movers were gone, probably paid to disappear when flashing lights showed up. 2 officers stepped out, young, polite, with the clipped confidence of men trained to handle noise complaints and family squabbles, not property fraud. "Ma'am, we got a call," the taller one started. "Yes," I said. "I'm the homeowner. I returned to find a woman and hired workers removing my property without permission." Melissa cut in. "She's confused. I'm her daughter-in-law. We have a care arrangement. She's been forgetting things lately." I held up my phone. "Officer, I have audio recordings of our last dinner conversation. I have video footage of the movers entering. And I have this." I pulled out the fake sale agreement. A forged contract they'd been waving around. They glanced at the paper. Melissa stayed quiet now. Smart. The shorter officer took a few notes. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "do you have anything showing you own the house?" I nodded. "Original deed, title insurance, utility bills in my name. Would you like to see them?" He nodded. I left them in the living room and returned with a folder I kept in the safe. They flipped through the documents quickly. Melissa didn't even try to look interested anymore. "Okay," the taller officer said finally. "Here's the thing. This isn't technically a criminal matter. Yet. No physical force. No clear theft. But," he looked at Melissa, "if you're acting without power of attorney, without legal authority, you may be opening yourself to civil liability." Melissa crossed her arms tighter. "We were only trying to help. She's been deteriorating." "Then she can get a medical evaluation," the officer replied. "Until then, you can't make those decisions for her." "I'll be contacting my lawyer," I added. "You'll receive formal notification shortly." He nodded. "That's your right. They took down our names. Said they'd file a report in case anything escalated. Advised me to install new locks, consider a security system." Melissa stood there the entire time, burning holes into the floor with her eyes. Once they left, she turned to me like we were in the middle of a friendly misunderstanding. "Karen, this is getting out of hand." "No," I said. "This is me taking it back into my hands." She stepped forward, then thought better of it. "You're being paranoid," she hissed. "You'll regret pushing us away." I tilted my head. "I regret letting you this close." Then I opened the door. "Leave," she did. And I didn't breathe until the engine of her BMW faded down the drive. I stood in the silence, not afraid, not shaking, just aware of how close they'd come, of how far I'd let them in. But that door, it wouldn't be opening again, not without consequences. The locks were changed by noon the next day. The locksmith, a quiet man with a scar down one forearm, didn't ask questions. He worked quickly, professionally, pausing only to nod when I said, "No spares to family." When he left, I stood by the front door and clicked the deadbolt twice. Click, click. It sounded final. Good. Then I made the second call, the one that mattered. "Langston?" A familiar voice answered on the fourth ring. "I wasn't expecting a call from you." "Paul," I said, "do you still handle estate litigation?" He paused, but not long. "Of course. You need representation?" I told him everything. I didn't dress it up, didn't downplay it to sound less foolish, just the truth. Sharp, dry, and unapologetic. By the time I finished, Paul was silent. Then he cleared his throat and said, "Send me copies of the sale agreement, any audio recordings, and photographs of the moving activity. We're filing for an injunction." "Injunction?" "Immediate court order to prevent them from making any claims on the property," he explained. "Once it's in place, they're legally barred from listing, negotiating, or misrepresenting ownership." I felt my spine lengthen. What else can I do? "We'll also file a cease and desist. Stop any further assistance from Melissa, and I'd strongly recommend you begin restraining order paperwork. Even a temporary one makes a statement. I want to file it, then we will." That afternoon, I printed everything. The forged contract. Melissa's scripted voice from dinner, subtly pressuring me. A photo I'd snapped of the movers hauling out my chest of drawers. All of it. I hand-delivered the file to Paul's office, not because I didn't trust email, because I wanted to see the look on his face when he opened the folder. He didn't disappoint. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, leafing through the pages. "They really thought they'd get away with this?" "No," I said. "They were counting on me not fighting back." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "They miscalculated. Outside, the sky was gray, thick with summer weight, but no rain." I walked back to my car with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. That night, I moved the black notebook from behind the spice rack to the safe. They weren't gonna gaslight me again. They weren't gonna walk through my doors and pretend it was still 1999, that I was some soft-handed woman begging to stay relevant. This wasn't about property anymore, or inheritance, or even betrayal. This was about war and dignity, and showing them what it costs to corner someone who spent her life building everything they're now trying to steal. The line had been drawn, and I was done pretending it was a misunderstanding. The room still smelled like him, oil paint, turpentine, and a hint of cedar wood from the easel we bought in Sedona on a whim. John's studio hadn't changed in over a decade. I kept it clean, preserved, sacred. But that morning, I walked in not to remember, but to prepare. The canvases were stacked in the corner. His last one, unfinished, still rested on the stand. A blur of palm trees in twilight, half-painted, the brushstrokes gentle, like he always was. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. John used to say this room was where he made sense of the world, that even when his body failed him, this space kept his mind intact. So when the chemo took his hands, he just taught himself to use the other ones, quietly, with resolve. I sat down in the chair by the window. The leather was cracked from years of sun, but the seat was still warm somehow. Familiar. I ran my fingers along the edge of the armrest like I used to run them along his jaw. Then I spoke to him, aloud. "They came for the house, John." My voice didn't shake. They thought I'd just let them take it, that grief and age would leave me soft. Outside, the garden buzzed with summer, the hedge too thick, the roses a little wild. I hadn't trimmed them this week. For once, it didn't feel like a failure. It felt like defiance. "I'm not broken," I whispered, "but I am angry." It wasn't the kind of anger that explodes. Not loud, not erratic. It was cold, measured, the kind of fury that waits its turn. That night, after I'd finished my tea, I opened John's old filing cabinet for the first time in years. Among tax folders and property maps was something I hadn't seen since 2004, a cassette recorder. I picked it up. The buttons still clicked, solid, heavy in the hand. I placed it on the desk next to my smartphone. a relic beside a weapon. Then I began writing. Not just legal statements, but a personal ledger. Every moment they'd trespassed, lied, manipulated. Melissa's voice in dinner recordings. David's silence on every phone call. Every single "we just want what's best," laced with entitlement. I wrote until midnight, then 2 a.m. When I finally stopped, I had 10 pages. Facts, dates, quotes, reactions. Not for the court. For me. Because before I could burn their lies, I needed to light something inside myself. Rage didn't consume me. It carved me out. By morning, I'd turned it into something precise. I opened the notebook one last time and underlined the final entry. They loved what I had, but never who I was. I tore that page out and taped it to the refrigerator. Like a promise, like a battle cry. I invited her over again. Just her. No David this time. "Let's finish our talk," I said over the phone. "About the house." She didn't hesitate. "Of course. Just us girls, right?" I could hear the gloat tucked inside her voice. She thought I'd folded. I wore my softest sweater and pulled my hair back in a bun. No makeup. Just enough fragility to bait her deeper. I even opened a bottle of the Merlot she liked, the one she used to snatch from my cabinet during family dinners. The doorbell rang at 11:03 a.m., right on time. Melissa swept in with a confident smile, faux concern barely cloaking her glee. "You look good, Karen. Have you been sleeping better?" I poured her a glass. "Better, yes. More. Decisive." We sat in the sunroom, the white curtains casting soft shadows over her manicured lies. Her fingers circled the wine glass lazily. I spoke gently, nudging her into her favorite delusion, control. "I've been thinking," I said, "about the transition. Maybe it's time I considered offers." Melissa's eyes lit up. "Really? That's so wise of you." I watched her reaction, the sudden glint, the flicker of calculation. "I've spoken with a few people," she went on quickly. "There's real interest in the property. Discreet interest." "Oh?" I said, voice syrupy. "Like who?" She took the bait. "John Mercer," she said smoothly. "You remember him, right? From David's college days. He's a broker now. He already has 2 potential buyers lined up. International clients. Very exclusive. We could close in weeks." She sipped her wine, leaned back, comfortable, unaware. "Just imagine," she continued. "You could move somewhere simple, peaceful, and we'll take care of everything. Renovations, showings, contracts. You won't have to lift a finger. And how do you plan to explain the forged documents?" I asked, watching her freeze mid-swallow. Her smile twitched, then returned, just barely. "Forged? I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you are," I said. "The fake signature, the unauthorized listings, the temporary authorization I never signed. I have it all." Melissa blinked. Once. Twice. And then, behind her, the guest room door creaked open. Paul stepped out, crisp navy suit, recorder in hand. Melissa's face drained of color. "Who the hell is that?" "My attorney," I said simply. "He's been listening for the last 20 minutes. "You tricked me." "No," I said, standing. "You tricked yourself. You came into my house, lied about my health, tried to take everything I built. And now you've confessed, on tape, to manipulating sale negotiations on property you don't own." Paul didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look on Melissa's face, rage swallowed by realization, said it all. I took one slow step toward her. "Leave, Melissa, and take your delusions with you." She stood, shaking slightly. "David will hear about this." "Oh," I said. "He already has his own chapter in the file. The wire transfers? I found them too." She looked at Paul, at me, then, without another word, turned and walked out. I closed the door behind her, locked it. Then I turned to Paul. "Send the tape to the judge." I didn't call her back. I didn't argue, didn't text, didn't reach for closure. I let the silence speak for me. 3 days passed without a word. Melissa must have sensed something was coming, maybe from the tone of my voice, or the way Paul never blinked when she stammered through her denial. But she didn't contact me. She knew better now. Instead, I let the legal envelope do the talking. Paul delivered it himself, hand to hand, outside the gates of their manicured community, where reputation mattered more than love. Melissa opened it there on the curb, dressed in gym clothes and sunglasses too large for her thin, pinched face. Inside, a cease and desist, a fraud suit, and a notarized notice informing her that the deed was intact, the contract was void, and the broker she'd whispered about was under investigation. I wasn't present. I didn't need to be, but I imagined the moment, the flash of pale disbelief. The realization that her whispered deals and fake signatures hadn't led to riches, but charges. What I was present for was the knock on my door 2 hours later. David. He looked smaller, not just thinner, but hollow, like someone had finally turned off the spotlight he'd been standing under for years. "Mom?" he said, voice cracking. "We need to talk." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "No," I said. He blinked. "Please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "I understand you let her into this family, then stood there while she tried to steal it." He flinched. She just got in too deep. You thought I'd roll over. You thought grief and age made me weak." His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Melissa's not..." "Okay, she didn't mean..." "She meant every word," I said, voice steady. "And now she has none." From my pocket, I pulled a small stack of documents, just one for him, a trust amendment. "This removes you both from the family trust," I said, handing it to him. "Effective immediately." He looked at it like it might burn him. "You're cutting me out?" "No," I said. "You cut yourself out. I'm just making it official." For a moment, I saw something in him. Grief, maybe, or shame, but it passed too quickly to matter. "You'll regret this," he muttered, eyes low. "No," I replied. I regretted letting it get this far. He turned, walked to his car, and didn't look back. I stood at the top of the steps until he was gone. Then I went inside, closed the door, sat in the silence of my Stillmine house. No shouting, no fury, just paper, ink, and truth doing the job fists never could. I didn't expect him to come back the next morning, but he did, pounding on the front door like a landlord reclaiming a property, as if he hadn't just been erased from the trust, as if rage could rewrite legal documents. I opened the door just far enough to look him in the eyes. "Don't do this," I said. "It's over." He didn't hear me, or wouldn't. "You think this makes you strong? Filing papers? Cutting me off? That's not strength, that's spite." I leaned against the door frame. Spite would have been pressing charges for conspiracy. This is restraint. His face was red, not from heat, but panic. His hands kept moving, into his pockets, back out, rubbing his forehead. He wasn't angry. He was exposed. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "It was just a transition plan. We were trying to secure the future. You forged documents. She didn't mean for it to go that far." "You stood by," I snapped, voice sharp now. "You let her lie. You let her box my life into cartons and whisper to strangers that I was slipping." He looked down. "I was trying to protect our future." "No," I said. "You were trying to shortcut your way to comfort." He didn't answer. I stepped inside and came back with another folder. Thinner this time, a single sheet on top. "Recognize these?" I asked, flipping it around so he could read. His eyes scanned the page. Froze. "Those wire transfers Melissa thought I wouldn't notice? Commission payments to John Mercer, hidden under consulting codes? Yeah. I found them, filed under project support. Clever, if you'd been laundering cash, not inheritance." His lips parted. "I trusted you," I said softly. "And you treated me like a placeholder?" He took a breath. "Mom? Don't," I warned. "Don't say my name like it means something now. You gave that away." The wind stirred. The old oak tree by the driveway rustled softly, a sound I'd once loved when rocking David to sleep in the nursery upstairs. The sound of calm. Now it felt like a warning. "I never stopped loving you," he muttered. "That's the problem," I said. "You loved what I gave, not who I was." He stepped back, like I'd slapped him, but I didn't flinch. I stayed in the doorway, steady and calm. "You've both been removed from every legal connection to this house, the trust, the will, the accounts. You are, officially, nothing more than my son by biology, not by behavior." His eyes darted. He was unraveling faster now, hope draining like a wound. "This is wrong," he whispered. "No," I said. "It's overdue." Then I handed him a photograph. One from the security camera. Melissa waving around the forged deed in my foyer. "Give this to your lawyer," I said. "You'll need one." I didn't slam the door when I shut it. I didn't need to. The lock clicking into place was louder than any goodbye I could give.